Walt, come on out. Ladies and gentlemen, I proudly introduce to you Walt Fricke. Dave. Grab a seat, Walt. I first say thank you so much for being here. I will also say that some of that was blanked out because of those F-somethings out there. I apologize for that, but yeah, we'll get into some more of the stuff that probably you missed later. But Walt, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for what you do. I told you inside, I'll tell you out here, I respect you. I respect you greatly for where you've been, what you've done. Hey, back there, okay, and now with this Veterans Airlift Command, and we really, really do appreciate that. So thank you for that. I won't go into any more of his history other than, hey, I'll say now, how'd you get here, Walt, by the way? That happens to be his airplane right there. And what was it, 29 T-34s were in the formation, is that right?
On Monday, right.
Okay, and you were leading one of the 4 ships in that. And that was your arrival.
Yep, we did the missing man arrival on Monday.
Okay, and y'all are kind of going, now, wait a second, how did he get from that to that? And we'll get into that in a minute, but it's a beautiful, beautiful airplane. If you really take a look, he's got it obviously decorated in Army colors here. Yeah, no surprise to that. But you can also see, hey, he's got some call signs written on the side of this, and he's got his medals down here too. 2 Bronze Stars as our rimmer too, right? Thank you, sir. Anyway, the top one is Top Tiger 17, then he's got Smoking, he's got Mustang 25. And I'll just ask Walt to describe what those really mean.
Well, those are, the unit that I flew with in Vietnam was the 68th Assault Helicopter Company in Benoit, and which was 3 Corps. I was there in 1968. And we were called the Top Tigers, 68th Assault Helicopter Company, Top Tigers. And when you start out, you get to fly co-pilot in one of the slicks. I was trained to fly gunships at Fort Rucker. I got to Vietnam. I had 2 weeks of specialized gun training in a B model. And so I thought I was going to be a gunship pilot. That's what I really wanted to do. And I got there, and the CO said, you need some experience before you're going to fly guns. I said, no, I've got 2 weeks of training at Fort Rucker. I'm supposed to be flying gunships. He said, young man.
And you were 19 years old at the time, is
19,
that right?
yeah.
19 years old, okay.
Yeah, just turned 19.
Okay.
So I joined the Army. I took the test to join the Army and go to flight school when I was 17. I graduated high school when I was 17. And I would have been 18, but I was sick a year. But I joined the Army when I went to take the test when I was 17, and they said, would you go in right now if we can get a waiver on the age? Because my flight instructor had been drafted, he was going to flight school, and we were at Detroit at the same time at the induction center. And I said, I'm ready to go. And they called the Department of the Army and tried to get a waiver, but they couldn't. So I had to wait until I was 18 years and 3 months old. 18 and 3 months is as soon as you could fly a helicopter.
Wow. So
I backed up the date and said I can join on January 13th, and I'll be flying. So I was the youngest helicopter in the Army for a few minutes, until somebody came behind me. But anyway, I got to Vietnam and thought I was going to fly gunships, and they put me in a slick, which is that's probably an H model, but it was a D model. It is
an H.
It's an H?
In fact, the owner is out here somewhere. There he is, right up front there.
Thank you.
Yep. He was probably going to leave today, by the way, and he said, no, and we really wanted to get a Huey in here, and we did. And yeah, Greg DeWind, thank you. Stand up, please, Greg. That's his airplane right there, okay?
Thank you very much for doing this. That was very kind of you, sir. So we flew, and what I'll do is I'll describe what these 3 call signs in my company were. Top Tiger 17, I was a slick driver. I flew one of these for about 2.5 months until I made aircraft commander. And then I flew Smoky, which is one of these with a 55-gallon drum of Corvus oil, a bladder actually, across where the back seat goes. And it pumped into 4 nozzles into the exhaust, 4 or 5 nozzles, and left an air show smoke like you've never seen. I mean, these are high-powered pumps, and it left a smoke ring that would turn this field IFR for 20 minutes.
So what did you use it for?
Flew by.
What were they using the smoke for?
The purpose of that was when you flew a combat assault, we'd fly 10 helicopters into a landing zone, the smoke ship would fly down along the tree line at 40 knots, which gives you the best smoke, also gives them the best target. But we would fly down at 40 knots along the tree line and then maybe go across the tree line in front, and maybe if they're taking fire on the other side, we'd come back down the other side. So while they're unloading the troops, they could do it in the fog. Nobody could see them. And so by the time the helicopters left it off, the guys were all pretty well hidden. So that was the idea behind the smoke ship. So I flew slicks. My old TAC officer from flight school came and joined our unit, and he was flying the smoke ship. But he was there for his second tour, and he was kind of getting the idea this was going to be a rinse and repeat, and it could end badly for him. So he wanted to get out of flying the smoke ship. Started out when they invented Smokey, it was Old Smokey, and there was one for the whole battalion. We'd fly, he would go from one operation to the next, flying smoke insertion for one company, then go 20 miles and fly a smoke insertion for another one, and a bird colonel and a lieutenant colonel will fly in Old Smokey for about 2 weeks until they got all shot up and they said, this is a job for warrant officers. 19-year-old
That was where you
kids.
came in.
So my old TAC officer was a warrant officer. He got the job, and he had it for about 2 months, and he wanted out. He didn't say this. He just said, you are really a good stick, and I want you to fly Smokey because it's a challenging job, and I think it's something you'd love. So he got me raced through. It normally takes 3, 4, 5, 6 months sometimes to be moved from the right seat to the left seat to be aircraft commander. So 2.5 months in, my old TAC officer had me under his wing. I was made aircraft commander, and they gave me the Smokey job. Commissioned officers could ride along once because they had to know how to work this stuff, but it was a warrant officer's job, for some reason.
A CW1, 2, somewhere in
I
there?
was a W01 at the time,
okay.
19 years old.
Yeah.
And so that's what Smokey did, and I loved the job because we got to fly all day. Combat assault guys would bring the troops in and go back, maybe wait for if they needed reinforcements and go back and extract them at the end of the day. We had a 50 caliber machine gun mounted in the side of this along with the 2 M60s where the door gunner and crew chief manned. We had a third crew member back there with a 50 cal. So when we were flying down the tree line, he could help keep the heads down, just pop, 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 pop with the 50 caliber. And we would do the smoke run. And then we'd be tasked when the command and control ship left to go get fuel or whatever, we'd be running the operation overhead until he got back. So it was a great job. I got to fly all the time, so I loved that job.
Okay. But then you changed and you moved.
Then I changed to Mustangs, which was our gunship. We had 4 Charlie models, which is a shorter version of this. It doesn't have the cubby hole in the back. And we flew with a crew chief and a door gunner. All of us were gunners. The aircraft commander fired the rockets, the co-pilot fired the miniguns, and
okay, so you had, from a gun standpoint, what do you have in the back here? You had
2 M60s with as much ammunition as the airplane could lift off the ground.
Okay.
The floor was full of boxes of ammunition. So an M60 on this side,
Okay.
1 on that side. We had rocket pods, which would be anywhere from a hog with 38 rockets down to 7 a side, and then miniguns. And the miniguns used up a lot of ammunition, 6,000 rounds a minute when you went one side of the head, 3,000 rounds a minute. And if you went past center, so you didn't shoot yourself, this one would go up to 6,000. So, in 45 seconds, you could be out of ammunition. So we fired short bursts.
And the rockets were what, 2.75? And high explosive?
2.75.
Okay.
Right.
And what was the largest pod? How many would
That was the pod. The hog was 19 rockets.
Okay.
We carried 19 on the side, and then the smaller version, which what we generally flew.
Okay.
I flew the Hog one time, and we were chasing the guy, and we got frustrated and hit the salvo button, and we fired them all, and the helicopter stopped. I mean, it was like so the Charlie model gunship had a bigger rotor blade, a wider blade. It was built for speed, maneuverability, and it didn't hover very well. And we were taking off 2,000, 2,500 pounds over gross, and they don't hover. So you'd line up down the runway PSP metal panel, and you sort of get it moving forward. You have all the power you could pull without bleeding off RPM, and you just sort of slide it down until you got enough speed to go through translational lift, which the whole rotor disc then flies, and you'd bounce it off and get it in the air and sneak off. And once it was flying, it was fine. But you developed a very fine control touch, because if you can lose lift, move the stick this much, you lose lift in the rotor system, it settles back to the ground. Mm-hmm. My first takeoff in the gunship was with a good friend who'd been doing it a while, and we had a runway and a drop-off, and there was another helipad below us with a bunch of, gunships parked in revetments. And I got it almost to the edge of this runway, but I was milking it back and forth, and I was running out of speed and ideas and altitude, and we got out over the drop-off, and he kind of grins, takes the controls, kicks right pedal, which gives you a little bit of extra, takes a little bit of the load off, because you're putting a lot of load on this when you're holding the helicopter straight. So he let the left pedal go, and we just kind of drifted to the right, pop down onto the ground. He looks at her and he says, "Not as easy as it looks, is it?" So that was the gunship. Now let me.
How many missions did you get as a gunship guy?
I only flew guns for about 40 days.
Okay.
And I'll tell you how I got there and how it all ended. Okay. To describe an operation, I'll tell you about one day that this has been captured somewhere on video, and it may be a better or worse story depending on how long ago I told it. So I've been asked to write a book, but I said I'm never writing this stuff down because it'll never get any better. I can't make it any better once I write it down, right?
Once upon a time, right?
Once upon a time. So it was 16th of September 1968. We had a task to find some NVA, North Vietnamese regulars, which meant they were wearing uniforms, and they weren't, guys with cone hats and black pajamas. They were uniformed soldiers, had been spotted south of Dau Tiang. A company size, maybe 120 of them, had been seen in the open. And we went and picked up some Vietnamese Rangers, 25th, I think it was the 25th out of the 25th, out of Dau Tiang, and our slicks, the top Tigers, loaded up a platoon of soldiers and flew them into a football, it was bigger than a football stadium, 4 football fields surrounded by jungle. And they flew the platoon in. I flew the smoke ring around the edge. We didn't take any fire. Got the troops on the ground, they're in the woods, and we got a call that their combat, they got into it right away. As soon as we left, there was a firefight. And their advisor, who was the only one that spoke English, got battle fatigue as a Marine, and they had to pluck him out and replace him. So the slicks had gone back to Dau Tiang. We got another platoon to take them in to reinforce because they got a firefight going. The C&C ship had left because they medevaced this guy out and had to take him up to Tay Ninh, and they were going to be gone for an hour. And now they got this action going, and the commander, who flies in the command and control helicopter, he rides in the back up here at 3,000 feet, and their goggles on, and commanding, telling their troops, the Vietnamese commander's up there. Well, he's gone. So now I go out, and they turn it over to me. I'm a 19-year-old kid, but I got a 50 caliber machine gun in the back. And so we bring the second group in. I did smoke them to get in, and they left. and then it kind of lights up. And by the time the command and control helicopter got back, I'd identified where the bad guys were. Basically, we weren't speaking the language, but I was putting 50 caliber rounds where the bad guys were, so there was a fight going on. Then CNC ship comes back, and they need to medevac out the replacement, or they're going to bring in the replacement advisor, an English speaker. And he comes in, the CO wants me to fly smoke cover for him. So he comes out east, and he's low level. I can't see him, but I told the old man where the bad guys were. Don't land him there. Land him over here. I couldn't see where he was putting him because we're low level coming in, and I'm on his wing. We're going to go into the LZ, and I'm going to smoke out. And just as he touched down, the gunship said, 4 gunships are orbiting here, cleaning things up. Gunship said, he's been hit. He picked up I didn't see it. I was just coming over the trees with the smoke, and his helicopter jerked 90 degrees to the right, and he started to fly out of the LZ, and I came back around to follow him, and I saw that he was hydraulic fluid, fuel, oil, coming out of the back, because it was all over my windshield. I was behind him, and he was just leaking everything. And I got on the radio and said, put it down, I'll pick you up. And the old man who just got back hadn't seen, he parked him where the bad guys were to start with, and then he said, negative, he can make it back to Dao Tiang. And I said, he can't make it back to Dao Tiang, he's going to go down. And I'm right behind him, and stuff's just pouring out of his helicopter. And he's barking, no, go back to Dao Tiang. And I said, no, he needs to put it down. And all of a sudden, a big black puff of smoke comes out of the back of his helicopter, and he starts into an auto rotation. He flares, and he's not flying the helicopter, it turns out. He's just hanging on for dear life. He never did an auto rotation. He just fell 800 feet into this triple canopy, and he flared, went in through the triple canopy jungle, and they're big like the wall of fire out here. Blew up. I didn't know he was dead, so I thought, we got to go see if we can get him out. So we landed. There was a little field right behind where he went in, maybe 80 yards behind where he went in. We went in downwind, overloaded. My crew chief and door gunner jumped out of the helicopter at about 10 feet. He said, sir, should we jump? Because I was over gross weight coming in downwind. I was going to hit hard. And he said, should we jump? And I kind of hesitated, and I said, yes. I thought, there's 400, 800 pounds gone out of the helicopter. And I got to tell you, those guys that rode in the back of these helicopters are my heroes. If there's anybody here that was a door gunner or a crew chief, you have my undying admiration, because you were the heroes of this deal, of the helicopter war. Was the guys in back. Flying them was fun. We'd land back, and I'm 19 years old, but we'd land back at the base and go to the club and drink beer, and they would climb on top of the helicopter and work for another 5 hours getting it ready for tomorrow. And then trust a 19-year-old kid with their life all day, keeping us out of trouble from those cubby holes. So those were the guys. My crew chief, who I put in for a Silver Star for this, jumped out of the helicopter with his M60. I don't know how he didn't break his legs. And he must have dropped the gun when he hit the ground. He and the door gunner ran into the jungle, found the crash site, which the helicopter had landed and slid forward, and then it blew up as it hit, but it slid forward. 3 of the crewmen were already dead they took 100 rounds in the LZ. The co-pilot lived long enough to get him to the scene of the crash. He was wiping his blood off the instruments so the pilot could see read the instruments. He slid forward. The windshield got blown out. He got shot in one leg. That's why the helicopter jerked. The chicken plate, we had a chicken plate next to the seat, big armored plate, broke off and broke his other leg. He pulled himself out over the nose of the helicopter and was laying in the ground underneath, protected from the fire. My door gunner and crew chief got from here to the Quonset hut from him. He thought he heard him coming, and he hit his gun. I thought it was VC because they were all over the place. He's ready to shoot when he passed out. And they got to him and dragged him back out. And we had guys running through our LZ at the same time. I kept the helicopter on the ground. I got out of the helicopter to protect the area, told my co-pilot to take off in orbit until he saw him coming back out of the woods. And I looked at him. He'd been in country 2 weeks. And he had his eyes were this big and his face was white. And I thought, that's a bad idea. Just stay here. And so my crew chief and door gunner came out of the brush with their shirts completely torn off, pants torn off. They had their boots and their underwear dragging him out. It was so thick. And another slick landed, picked him up, took him to the hospital. He's still with us. He's a retired detective from Syracuse, New York Police Department. And his wife hugs me every time she sees me, as you can imagine. But so that was the end of that day, I had to go do it again because we took him to they took him to the hospital with the fight still going on. So I ran back and dropped my crew chief and door gunner at Dow Tiang, swapped them out for another crew chief and door gunner because my guys were indecently exposing themselves. So I got another door gunner and crew chief, flew back in, and they had to medevac the guy we took in. He got shot immediately. We had to medevac him out, and so they waited until dark. So I had one last extraction to make when the medevac got there, and they wanted it quiet, and they begged for smoke, and so I went in and I did a complete U around the medevac helicopter while he dragged this guy out. And you saw the fireworks display here the other night. That's what that LZ looked like when I went. We never took a round, but I couldn't believe it. So we got back to Benoit. I think I flew 10 hours that day. I walked into the CO's office. The same guy that told me, you're not ready to fly. You need some experience before a guy fly guns. And I said, I want to fly guns now. I've earned it. And he said, you're right, you have. And gunship platoon had already requested me, so it was easy transition. Then I started flying guns. So that's a story of a day in the life of a slick and a smoke ship and a gunship.
All right, let's go into, and thank you. I mean, yeah, what can I say? And folks, if you might not have heard it, but how did he describe himself inside? He said, yeah, I used to be a retractable gear kind of guy. He says, no, now I'm not. And that's because, hey, one of his feet doesn't work quite. He says, I'm kind of fixed gear on one leg and I'm retractable on the other. And that's because of an incident that happened in this aircraft right here. Describe what happened there and where you were sitting and what happened.
Okay, welcome to flying gunships, which I thought it'd be safe because we could shoot back. I was flying, as a gunship in a Charlie model, you flew in the right seat. That's where the rockets were, and you had control of everything. Opposite from Slick's, aircraft commander flew in the left seat. So the gunship, the Charlie model gunship, aircraft commander sat right seat. So I made AC pretty quickly in the guns. I was flying gunships. One of the things, I loved to fly. I was a kid. And they had and my platoon leader knew I loved to fly. My old platoon leader, my previous platoon leader, they had a grease board in the BOQ where we lined up to see who was going to fly tomorrow. All the pilots' names were down here. 1 through 31 was the date across the top. When we got home at night, we would grease pencil in how many hours we flew that day. So I flew 8, 7, 10, 18 one day. And this was a busy month, probably one of our busiest. I think it was the month I flew 18 hours in one day. And the platoon leader would schedule for tomorrow by looking at that board and say, who's flown 6 days in a row, you're off the list. They can't possibly, can't fly more than 6 days. That's dangerous, and you get fatigued and that sort of thing. And then he'd go to 5, and that's how he'd work. He'd start with the guy that didn't fly yesterday. If he's any good, he's on the list. And then they'd work their way up until some guys, sometimes he'd get a day off after 3 or 4 because they had enough guys to fly. I'd come back every night, and I'd write the hours in, and the next night I'd write the hours in at the beginning of the month. I'd get about the 3rd or 4th day, and I'd go back and erase the 1st. So I always had only flown 2 days whenever he looked at it, and I flew 30 days straight, in 1 month, and I think I flew 240 hours that month. And then when they compiled all the records from the aircraft and they're going through it, the old man comes and said, "What are you doing?" I like to fly. So I was flying gunships, and normally you fly in the aircraft commander would fly in the right seat, co-pilot would fly in the left because you had the miniguns. And the boss, my platoon leader, we had a tough mission down by down Dao Tiang, which is on the Cambodian border, with the 9th Infantry Division. And we always got into it with them, and he was a little bit like, he didn't like to navigate, or he wasn't very good at it or something. So he came to me and he said, "Hey, I know you're off tomorrow, but would you fly with me? Because we're leading a heavy gun team, and we got, and I said, "Sure." So my day off, I'm in the left seat. We landed to refuel and rearm, and we're doing a combat assault, bringing 10 helicopters full of grunts into an LZ, 9th Infantry Division, and we're supposed to clean the LZ up from both sides, just quiet everybody down, firing rockets and miniguns. If we're taking fire, so be it, but we're trying to keep their heads down. And we took off, and of course he knew I like to fly, so I'm flying the helicopter. And I'm flying it from the left seat. We take off, clear the minefield. That's when you would normally arm the guns for your aircraft commander. That's your job in the left seat. Push the circuit breakers, which are up here. Push all the circuit breakers in. You didn't want to have hot guns in the fueling point. So we took off, and I was flying. So normally it would have been my job to arm the guns. So I didn't do it because I was flying, and normally it was my job to arm the guns, so he didn't do it either. So we get out to the LZ and we roll in on the gun run, and he starts to fire the rockets and nothing's happening. I looked up and see that and I'm jamming the circuit breakers, and he pulls up and does a pedal turn, and we're about stopped up here. He's trying to stay in front of our wingman, and he's cranking it around real tight. And when he fired the rockets, the rocket on the left, coming out of the left tube, exploded. And we don't know if we were taking fire, we don't know if it got hit with a round or just was a bad rocket. But it blew up, took the left front of the cockpit out, the glass, the nose chin bubble, my foot with it. I grabbed my knee and my foot flipped around and landed in my lap. And thus the call sign under the canopy there is footloose. I got that from my crew chief about 10 years later. I always wanted to give you a call sign, but I didn't know if I said, "Tell me," and he told me. I said, "It's been on my airplane ever since." So anyway, off we go to a medevac hospital, and well, actually we didn't. We landed at a fire support base right on the Cambodian border. And just because he's screaming, he freaked out, and he's pulling way too much pitch. My crew chief, again, the hero, behind me, he got hit in the chest with shrapnel, but he had a chicken plate on, but he broke a couple of ribs. And as soon as it happened, he dove forward, unpinned the seat's pin down there, and rotate back 90 degrees. And he unpinned my seat, rotated me back, so I'm laying down, whipped off his belt, and put a tourniquet on my leg. Like 1, 2, 3, like he'd practiced it 100 times. And this guy really had it together. And so he gets a tourniquet, and meanwhile, the aircraft commander is sucking all the pitch out of the rotor blades, and we're about to have this thing going up on us. And I reached up with my other foot and keyed the mic and the stick, because it's a intercom if you tap it once. And I keyed the mic with my foot, and I said, "Lee, I'm okay. Come, don't kill us." And so he helmet fire went out. We landed at a fire support base, and there happened to be a doctor visiting this fire support base doing physicals or something. So we landed there, and a slick came over to pick me up, medevac me to a hospital, and the doctor came out, and he blew up a splint on my leg and put another tourniquet on and shot me full of stuff. And 20 minutes later, we're at a MASH unit where a doctor said he wanted to cut my leg off. And I said, "No, I can feel my toes." And he said, "You think you can? Everything's severed." He said, That's phantom nerve pains. I said, cut my boot off and I'll show you. And I didn't want to lose my leg if I didn't need to. And he's mad at me. He cuts my boot off, but he said, there's no way to salvage this leg. He said, we're going to clean it up, amputate your leg. And one of my Mustang gunship pilots pulled his .45 out and said, if he doesn't want his leg cut off, you're not cutting his leg off. and I didn't hear that story for a couple of years, so I'm not sure. I don't remember that happening. He does, but and several other guys did. But anyway, so I get medevac back to Japan, back to the States. And it was sort of the end of the fun and games till everybody gets hurt thing that we had going over there. And that's sort of that's how
that's the end of that chapter, so to speak.
That's that chapter.
Okay,
Yep.
and you ended up with what, 800 some hours of combat time?
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and flew a variety, and yeah, unfortunately. Well, the good news is you're here. You're not dancing, but you're doing pretty good.
Right.
And again, I echo what you say. That the guys in the back are the guys that you got to say thank you to, because that guy had his act together when he sat there, unpinned the seat, pulled you back, put the tourniquet on you, and all that, and then have the doctor there, and then have the guy there with a .45. That was kind of nice too.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay. So now that ends that chapter. And now you get back, and now you start flying again. You start, you're going, hey, I'm alive and doing pretty well. My foot's doing all right. And so, how do you go from there to there? What, you ended up as a crop duster for a while, a glider instructor, and some other stuff.
Yep.
So
it's in your blood. It's in your blood. I mean,
yep.
My mom gave me a book when I was a kid about Douglas Bader. If you remember him, the World War II guy, double amputee. And because her cousin had a amputated leg from some kind of an accident, she didn't want to be us to be afraid of him. So she gave me this book knowing I was interested in aviation. So I was 10, 12 years old when I read that. And the interesting thing is when I looked down and saw my leg laid in my lap, I thought, I can still fly. Because he did. So that's all I cared about. I don't care if I can walk. I just want to fly. So.
But you walked away from helicopters, basically, right? I mean, you got back into the fixed wing stuff and have been doing that for years and years.
I don't fly helicopters anymore, but I got out of the Army and started flying airplanes. I went to school at Michigan State and taught gliders and towed gliders and had a crop dusting business for a while, and then I got into banking but I always had airplanes for fun, and flew Warbirds for the last 30, 40 years. So when I retired from General Motors, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan were cranking up, and we had hospitals full of guys. When I got hurt, I was in the hospital for about 6 weeks before my family could come and see me, and it was a traumatic time because I was anxiety, PTSD, going full flight to being in a hospital. And I had an airplane when I retired from General Motors, a twin-engine airplane. I thought I could solve that problem for somebody. So I went over to the VA, and I said, I want to fly families in to see their kids. They had a polytrauma center in Minneapolis, and I'll fly the kids home on convalescent leave. And I called a buddy at Angel Flight who was on the board of Angel Flight, and I said, could I do this just for veterans under Angel Flight? And he said, let's have lunch. And he said, I ran a foundation for General Motors, started one, and so I knew how to do this. He said, you can't do this by yourself. He said, this is too good of a thing. He said, you need to stand up a national program. You can do it. You know your background. You got the resources. He said, don't be selfish and fly your own airplane. Recruit a bunch of guys and make this happen nationwide. And, in about an hour conversation, that was lit. And I cranked up the Veterans Airlift Command. And the first couple of years I hired some people because we were dealing with professional people that are our volunteers. And I see, who's volunteers for the Veterans Airlift Command that's sitting here? Stand up. Stand up. If you're a VAC volunteer pilot, Mark, that... And there are 2,500, 2,700 of those guys nationwide that fly for us. And that's sort of the result of the very first day I started. I had the website built, spent a couple $100,000 putting a technology platform together so I could keep track of everything and schedule and everything. It had to be kind of unique because of our business. But I had hadn't flown a mission yet. DOD knew what I was doing, and they said, "Hey, we've got a young Marine that got hurt in Iraq. He's home in Melbourne, Florida, and his unit's coming back to Camp Lejeune. He wants to get his Purple Heart and his combat ribbon. We flew him up there on frequent flyer tickets, and he flew 13 hours between Melbourne, Atlanta, Birmingham, Charlotte to Jacksonville. And he was exhausted. They didn't even know if he was going to make the ceremony. He had a wheelchair and crutches kind of between the two, and the airlines didn't treat him real well. And he said, can you help us? The DOD said, can you help? I called 8 friends. I didn't know if this was going to work, the Veterans Airlift Command. I didn't know if I'd be able to recruit people or not. And so I called on 8 friends in Georgia and Florida that had airplanes, just sent an email and told them what I was starting. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to fly combat wounded, injured, post 9/11 combat wounded for medical and other compassionate purposes through a national network, hopefully, of volunteer pilots. I've got a need right now, 2 days from now, to get this kid back to Melbourne, Florida. So I sent it out to 8 guys. 5 of them signed up to do it. And I said, this is going to work. People really viscerally respond to taking care of our veterans in that way. Because you're not just flying a veteran, you're not just writing a check to a nonprofit and they're going to go do something nice. You're getting to thank the guy with a personal thank you note of your airplane and build a relationship with him. And I have to tell you, some of the best relationships have come out of this, the friendships, the ripple effect of this has been tremendous. I had a guy fly a mission for us, and he's since built homes for 29 veterans. He wasn't doing anything for veterans before he flew a mission for us. And he stood up a foundation, I think he's raised over $20 million now. He's a big supporter of the Veterans Airlift Command. He flies his own Global Express. He's owner-flown Global Express, and he's flown 250 missions for the Veterans Airlift Command with his crews and himself. And so the ripple effect has been tremendous. And
How long ago did you start? What year did
we started it in 2006. We've flown, I think, just over 21,000 passengers, and we've got 2,700 volunteer pilots and aircraft owners that fly for us.
Wow. Wow. All I can say is thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks to these guys. Thanks to our volunteers and supporters. That's what makes it work.
And the program is in strong hands today. It's going to continue. And you're still, if somebody wants to volunteer or wants to put their hand up and say, hey, I want to fly, there's ways to contact Walt. And I don't know if Scott will put it up there, but hey, there's a website out there that they can say, hey, no, sign me up. I'll be one of those guys, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. I still have to ask, though, okay, how'd you end up with a T-34, okay, and all this fixed-wing formation and warbird? Did you just decide that, yeah, you were a warbird guy, but you were a warbird guy in a helicopter, but then you said, hey, you got tangled up with this organization, and was this the first warbird you got?
Actually, this is the last warbird I got.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, I have T-28, T-6s, German, Focke-Wulf, I have Stearmans. I've flown in all the groups. This is my 3rd T-34, and I love it. It's an airplane, but it's also the camaraderie of the group is very similar to what we did in the military. Now, it's not, when we get really good, I'll say, well, I'm going to hire somebody to shoot at us and see how good we are, but then see if you can stay in formation. But I'll tell you, the T-34 group, of all of them, has been the one that brings me the most joy because it's so well organized and so well run, very safe. They train to the highest level. And if you saw the 29 ship formation, there might have been one guy a little out of position, but to me, that's an amazing feat, and I love it. I love the camaraderie, and the guys respect each other. We trust each other with our lives. And so you build a family very similar to the military. A lot of the guys are military, but even those that aren't, they get to experience what we experienced in the military, which is that close camaraderie and fun. And I got out of this, got a T6, flew with the T6 guys for a while, and I really missed the leadership, and I have to point them out. Bill Smith, Smitty. Smitty is a former Army helicopter guy who transitioned to A-10s, and he's got more SA in his little finger than 10 other guys put together. He runs that whole air show that you saw with all those airplanes. While leading 29 airplanes, he's also directing all the other ones. He's got it all locked in here. I don't know how he does it, but that's what makes it fun. So thank you, Smitty. Appreciate it.
All right, I got to go back a little bit and say, okay, you know, you kind of cut your teeth in aviation on these things. Any need, want, desire ever to go back to the whirlybird kind of thing?
You know, I went back to Fort Rucker about 4 months ago to speak at a Friends of Army Aviation, and they have one of these. And
a flyable one of these.
Flyable one. They go around and I met the guy at an air show, and he invited us to come and fly with him sometime. And I'd sort of forgotten that, but in the process, he asked me to speak at their annual event. And so when I found out no one else was coming in their T-34s, I was sort of hooked. I had to go because I had already agreed to speak at his event. So I get there, and they've got a Huey out on the taxiway, and he said, "Where do you want to sit, left seat or right?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We're going to go flying." And I said, "Well, you know, an H model, I would have been flying from the left seat as aircraft commander. I want to fly in the left seat. 56 years since I've flown a Huey." And he says, "Okay, I'll get it cranked up, and we'll take off and go out the pattern, and I'll let you take it and do it. What would you like to do?" And I said, "No, I don't want to fly it out there. I want to pick it up to a hover right here and hover out to the runway and take off. Once we're flying, you can fly the thing. They fly like an airplane. But can you hover it is the key." And he said, "You know, we've got about an 18-knot tailwind." I said, "I know how that works. I pulled it out of revetments with a 20-knot tailwind." And he said, "Okay," but he was right here, you know, just ready to grab the controls.
Oh, yeah.
But I've got video proof. I posted on Facebook. I picked it. You wouldn't have known there's a tailwind. I picked it. I felt like I had never gotten out of the thing. Just feel it, hold it, taxi out. We took off, got airborne, and I said,
"You got it."
I said, "You got it." And he turned downwind, and a chip light came on, or a master caution light came on, a chip light. He rolls it off, auto rotates back to the runway. You know, these are old airplanes. And they just had a little dust on the you know, their little probe there, so it wasn't a big deal. But anyway, yeah,
So
I really don't have it.
You don't need to do it
I
anymore.
don't need to do it again. I know I can do it, but you know, I love what we do. I love what we do. And last winter, we took 8 combat wounded vets, brought them to Punta Gorda. I got an 8 ship together, and these guys are door kickers. You know, you know how they work. You know, they sit down, they brief their mission, they go and kick down doors and shoot them up and and then they come back and they debrief. It's just kind of the same thing we do. And I knew they'd enjoy it, so I got these 8 combat wounded guys. We put them in the back of 8 airplanes, and we briefed the flight. We did a very thorough briefing. I mean, almost ground school. And we did the briefing and loaded them up. Went out and did 2 4-ship complete formation training sorties with rejoins and, you know, chasing each other. And then went over and landed and had lunch at another airport, debriefed, briefed another flight, came back. It was a highlight of and ours. Everybody that did it loved it. I mean, it was, and yes, one of the guys that I left out of that deal because he was a paraplegic, and I didn't think we could get him in the back of a T-34 and then out when we stopped for lunch. There was no room for his wheelchair, and we had to eliminate. He'd been sort of invited, but then he understood, and he was fine with it. He's a Special Forces guy. He shows up here the other day. He had gotten his wings from Able Flight, so he's a sport pilot, because you can fly with the hand controls. And he's sitting over at my bus over here in his wheelchair with his wife, and I was apologizing to him for the fact that he couldn't fly with us. And I said, "Do you think you could get in that thing?" And he said, "Well, I might bang around it. I think I could." I said, "Let's go do it." So I wheeled him over to the airplane, and he hoisted himself up on the wing. He said, "Hold my foot." I hold his foot. He grabs the side, pulls himself, locks his knee, standing there shaking. He pulls himself up on the rail, kicks his legs in, gets inside, and I thought, we may have to go flying now because I don't know how I'm going to get him out of here. But he managed to get himself back out, And I said, here's my card. I'll be back. He lives in Clearwater. I said, when I get there in November, you call me. We're going to put up a sortie just for you. And you're going to say, if you didn't hurt yourself getting out. He said, I broke a sweat, but I want to do this. So he's and that's what our volunteers that fly these guys get to see every time they fly is the spirit of these young guys that laid it on the line and they're suffer for the rest of their lives because of what they did for us. And we owe it to them. Now, if you're a Vietnam guy and you didn't get treated very well, I was in that category. I never got spat on. I think they were out of saliva by the time I got back. But I'm glad that we paid that price. I'm glad that happened to us because with the atmosphere today, if that had happened to the guys coming home today, we're done as a country because no one would want to serve their country. So I'm happy we paid that price so that things got turned around. But the guys that we take care of, everybody that flies for us knows, they're inspiring. It's life-changing for the people that fly for us, let alone the guys that we help move, and they get to feel the love of somebody face-to-face that's given them something they never could have dreamt of doing.
Well, I got to say thank you for your spirit, for your heart, and for what you do for our veterans. You know, as I started this brief, I have utmost respect for who you are and what you are. I'm going to stop right now, though. I know we're going to go over time again, most likely, but I'm going to open it up to some questions from these folks, and I'm sure they've got some. And then I'll say my formal thank you to you, the crew, and Connie. So questions. Anybody got questions, be it helicopter or T-34 or anything out there right now? No? Good. Well, hey, Zippy. By the way, this is Zippy back here. He's our reenactor. He's been working all week.
Thanks for
doing
sitting
an outstanding
back.
job.
Thanks for sitting back. That's like a good point to you.
So Zippy, thank you. And but he doesn't have a mic. Let's. We got a mic.
Got one over here first.
Okay, okay, Zippy, hang on.
Mr. Fricke, I'm not a veteran. I am a pilot, although I haven't been active for many years. I'm wondering, are there volunteer opportunities with your group for people who are not pilots?
Unfortunately, there are not. We've tried to think of ways to do it, but the flights are random, start and stop in different places, not where you are necessarily. We've had people offer to drive. We trimmed our thing to the point where the people that do our mission coordination, we have 2 mission coordinators and an executive director. We work from home. We have no bricks and mortar. We don't have an office. We work from our laptops. But the people that we do it are paid pretty well because they're on all day. And once a month, I'm on duty. So 24/7 for a week, once a month. That doesn't mean a lot, except that nobody calls us that doesn't get a response within an hour. Okay? Anytime. So whether it's a pilot, and part of the problem is, right, our pilots are professional business people. They don't have time to call up and say, get a volunteer who may be in on Monday, and, we got to get back to them. They had a mechanical issue, and they can't fly the flight they're supposed to fly in 4 hours. We deal with it. You're off the hook, we'll get somebody else, and usually those missions get filled because somebody will have the day available and want to do it. So, but we only have a very small staff, and we've got 2,500 volunteers, but they're pretty easy to manage because we send out an email to 100 guys saying we've got this mission, here's the story, here's where they need to go. Somebody will say, I'll do it. And then we connect them with a passenger, we kind of stay out of it so there's no tin can, who said, she said kind of thing. But thanks for asking, I appreciate that. There are, of course, other organizations you can get personally involved with, but.
All right. Hey, he's got a microphone now. Zippy, go ahead.
I do have to apologize. I forgot to bring out my 2.75-inch rocket for the display. I do have one.
I'm afraid of those.
But my question to you is, are you going to be in the Veterans Parade today?
No.
I was going to say it would be my honor to drive you in the parade today.
Oh, well, if I don't have to march.
No, you don't have to march.
No, we have a motorhome over here on the other side in front of the Warbirds with brochures and stuff. If you're interested in the Veterans Airlift Command, you come over. We're happy to answer questions, but yeah, I've got to be there.
Yeah, and after this, he'll hang around here a little bit too. And the owner of the Huey, are you going to be around? I know you're getting ready to get out of here, so I don't know how long he's going to be around, but he might be able to answer some questions about. We didn't cover this specific aircraft at all. You know, I mean, we told you what it was, but hey, we don't have any idea of the history. But we're just very thankful that it is here and we're able to represent. Okay, we got a question over. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your service. And
You're worth it.
yeah, you don't know me that well, but once again, thank you. Can you give us some particulars of your beauty sitting here, the T-34?
That is a B model T-34 built by George Baker, who was at the time in South Florida guy for. I had to clean that up, didn't I, Danny? In South Florida. Well, Danny's now in South Florida, so there were two guys that really did good jobs on these things. George Baker built this as his personal airplane, pretty much out of old stock new parts. So it's got a data plate that says 1953, but the airplane was built like new in 2000. And I bought it about a year and a half ago, changed the livery to make it personal, put Army on it versus Air Force. The Army had about a dozen of these that they use for chase planes for Charlie models, but not this exact color paint scheme. But I kind of like this, a Golden Knights paint scheme, you know, so sort of personalized airplane.
All right, thank you.
All right.
What's your website for VAC?
Oh, it's veteransairlift.org. You can Google it, or Google Veterans Airlift, or Google me. That's what you'll find, because that's what I'm all about.
All right, and I got it. This is typical for my presentations. I'm going to ask veterans and active duty. We want to say thank you. So please stand up. We got veterans and active duty out there. Yeah, we got a pile of them. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your service. We really do appreciate it. Any other questions? All right, we're going to wrap it up then. And did we miss anything? Is there anything you want to? No? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. But I have to say, again, thank you. I respect you for what you did, what you're doing. I hope you've got a succession plan. I hope this Veterans Airlift Command, continues on in perpetuity.
That's the plan.
And I suspect it will. We're all going to go away eventually, but I think you've got a strong organization right now, and we've got, again, so many pilots out there that want to raise their hand, and I think that will continue.
Yep.
So, Walt, thank you.
Thank you.
Again.
Thank you.
Well done.
Good job.